Well, ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker for the day is going to be Dr. Hary Elias. He graduated with first-class honours from Cambridge University in 1985. He holds two master's degrees, one from Columbia and one from Cambridge University, and a doctorate from Columbia. After successful of 22 years in private practice in London and New York, Hary returned to his native Indonesia in 2004, where he now provides instructional leadership to schools, institutes and universities. Hary holds an advisory and teaching position in schools and training centers and regularly travels to conduct trainings on a variety of institutions across Indonesia and Asia. Let's go ahead and welcome Dr. Hary on board.
Good morning to everyone, wherever you may be. I'm not sure, I didn't get to hear my introduction, but people tend to make me sound smarter than I actually am. Thank you, IBE Forum, for that lovely introduction, and welcome to my little session on digital transformations, your role and considerations as a leader. Now, as if being a leader isn't difficult enough, digital transformations in your school, in your learning, really has some special considerations. And what I'm going to do in this short session this morning is to really talk to you about 4 different strands. Now, as I said, it's impossible to touch on everything given the limited time we have. So what I propose to do is just to look at 4 very, very broad strands. And as I'm going through these 4 broad strands, what we will do is I'm going to ask you certain questions that I hope that you will take note. So we're going to look at different considerations in the context of being a leader in this digital transformation of your school. So we're going to look at the role. How do you form a high performance team? Then we're going to look at the other end of the spectrum. We're going to look at dysfunctional teams, right? What do we do about dysfunctional teams? And there's some tools that I will share with you for your further discovery and research as leaders. And then I'm going to touch on the topic of your success. How do you assess the assessment of how well the team did and how well the school has done in terms of this digital transformation? It will be ended, we'll round it off with a Q&A, and I'm already told that you are an extremely engaged audience, so feel free to put your questions in. There are nearly 2,000 people in this room, so if you'd like your questions answered, please feel free to put them up as early as possible. So your role, forming high-performance teams, dysfunctional teams, and assessing your success. So let's go straight to the meat of this morning's presentation. Now, as I said, as a leader, you are loaded with so many things, and we all know that as leaders, we have certain roles. But these roles tend to be a little different in terms of a digital transformation. And I say this not only from an academic perspective of having read and looked at the material, but also from a practical perspective, because I've helped schools in Indonesia, in Vietnam, in Cambodia, in India, Indian universities, in this digital transformation. So these are 3 things that I'd like to talk about this morning. Let me just move my box a little bit, or let me minimize that so that I don't block the slides. Now, these are the 3 main things that you do as a leader, and you do this every day. You build acceptance and have a shared vision. You plan, you implement, you monitor, and then you want to build a strong team. So let's focus on the first red box, building acceptance and having a shared vision. Now, these are the considerations and the problems. As I said, most of my talk is going to be talking about the problems you're going to face and some tools you can use to solve these problems. So let's look at the first red box, building acceptance. Now, not everyone likes change. And you should be very sensitive to your teachers, be very sensitive to your parents, be very sensitive to your students, because before you even embark on this digital transformation as a leader, you really have to get that buy-in. You need to get the teachers, the principals, the parents, and the students to want to actually have the digital transformation that you are hoping to achieve. And building acceptance is difficult. You are going to have some teachers who will not accept this change. And I'm sure even virtually, a lot of you are nodding your head and saying, yep, I know exactly who Hary is talking about. You're going to have some small group of resistance. And you can either choose to ignore the resistance and go ahead with it, or you can somehow try to help them overcome this resistance. Now, a lot of this resistance comes basically from them not feeling that they are participating or they're not ready to change. And one good strategy that some schools have used, in my experience, and it's worked, is to have a buddy system. So have the resistor and the conductor to pair up so that they can work at all times at their own pace, and you find that the resistance would be minimized. Now, having a shared vision, and this is what you need to think about as the leader. You have a vision, and the problem is most of these visions come from a Google search of images of digitally transformed classrooms. You know, we all go to Google search and says, oh, I want that. And the problem with that is twofold. Now, first of all, in deciding what your vision is, it's nice to shoot for the moon. I mean, lots of people say shoot for the moon and you know, be happy, shoot for the stars and be happy to get to the moon. No, you've got to actually start by looking at where you are. Now, in a continent as vast as Asia, you've got regions which are doing very well. You've got very well-trained staff. Some places barely have internet access, a stable internet access, like in Indonesia, we have this problem. You start by having a realistic vision. And I'll say that again. You start by having a realistic vision. Now, I have met some schools in this digital transformation. I've gone to some schools, and some schools don't even yet have stable internet. And they say, how do I do this? So their vision and their aims and their goals are different. So you start by looking at your school. Now, some schools, which are at a different price point, which are way up ahead of the curve. You might have a lot of money. You may be in a very developed country in the region. Good for you. Then that's where you can shoot for the stars. You can then really digitally transform your school. So when you're doing the vision, be very mindful that not everyone needs to get all the way up there in the next 2 or 3 years. You want to have different milestones. Be more modest. Make sure that your visions and your aims and your goals are not only achievable, but are realistic. And that's what I want to say about the red box. Now, the yellow box is where we earn our money, because that's hard work. We are all overworked and underpaid. I'm not sure anyone here feels that they are overpaid for what they do. But the planning, the implementation and monitoring is something that you really have to do. And this is something that you do all the time. Unfortunately, we don't have the time, so I'm not going to delve very much into this yellow box. Now, I'm going to delve a lot into the blue box. And let me just move this in case it's blocking your particular screen. But building strong teams. And I'm going to talk a lot this morning about building strong teams and assessment of where you are in terms of your digital transformation. So let's go to the next slide. Now, this is a high performance team. We always want a high performance team, and there are two ways to get it. The first way to get it is simply by chance. If you're lucky, you happen to have, you can call it kismet, you can call it fate, you can call it the invisible hand of God, but somehow you get a high performance team that helps you in this digital transformation. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. And in this slide, I want to share with you these three things. So the first problem, and this is for you as the leader, the first problem is that most leaders would use a traditional approach to forming a team to look after this digital transformation. And what do I mean by that? In the context of school, you simply say, okay, the vice principal, congratulations, you are in charge of the digital transformation. I'm going to have the IT support join this team and 3 senior teachers. And then you form a team. And then this team struggles. It doesn't become a high performance team. And that is the problem, because we're so wrapped up in this idea that it has to be led by a principal or it has to be led by the vice principal. So this is the key takeaway that I want to share with you at this part of the presentation, right? And it's a term called temporary competency hierarchies. And it really should be adopted by principals in the context of digital transformations, or in fact, any team that you want to actually form to achieve a purpose. So what is this creature? Now, there's a lot of words on this slide, and I hope that this slide will be available to you in some kind of PDF format. But basically, these temporary competency hierarchies is formed by everyone not actually having a leader within the team. So this ability is formed by the triad below, because politics completely disappears. It doesn't become Hary's team, or it doesn't become Mr. Lee's team, or it doesn't become Mr. Avid's team. It's a team where people take different leadership roles based on the requirement of the goal that is being sought. So if you're aiming for a particular goal, let's say in this particular aspect of your digital transformation, then you want this person to take that leadership role. And so the person best suited to a task takes the lead in alternating orders. So different people are leaders of this team at any one time. And what then happens is that everything is then focused on the goals to be achieved. It takes the personality out of it. It's not Hary's team. It's not the vice principal's team. It becomes the team that wants to achieve this one big goal. And you find, or rather we found, that the individual contributions and the effectiveness of every single member of the team goes up, right? I've also included on this slide certain considerations for you in what a high performance team looks like. These are the characteristics. So quickly jot them down. You want the team to be able to think critically, be clear about your decision-making process. The sharing of information is essential, right? Sharing of information is essential. There's a focus on results, and people are accountable for what they do. Now let's go to the other end of the spectrum. And this is about dysfunctional teams. I see my time is almost running out, so I'm going to speak as quickly as possible, and I assume that you can watch the recording again. So one of the more interesting things that I've come across this last year is what's called the Lencioni model of dysfunctional teams. So in his research in his book, he actually talks about 5 different kinds of dysfunctionalities within a team. And what is most interesting is that Lencioni has come up with a very simple test. Not only has he come up with a simple test, these tests are available on just by a simple Google search. You can find these tests, and you can actually conduct the tests for your teams, right? And so let's start by looking at this Lencioni model. And he says that there are 5 problems with teams. And what you want to do as the leader, obviously, is to minimize these dysfunctionalities so that your teams can become high performance teams. So we're looking at the absence of trust. That's clear. You need to trust. When you say something, you must mean it. People must trust your judgment as the leader. People must trust your knowledge. When you say, wait, I will decide later, people must be able to trust that you will come up with a decision, but at a later time. Fear of conflict. This is very clear, a fear of conflict. Lots of leaders, because digital transformation is such a VUCA situation, the VUCA. There's so many things that have to be decided within a week. And because there will be differences of opinions, you as the leader are going to spend a lot of time resolving these differences of opinion. And one of the dysfunctionalities of a leader is this fear of conflict. We don't want to decide because it will make one side happy. In Indonesia, we have this very interesting concept called tidak enak. Roughly translated, it simply means it's not nice to do that. I think the Chinese have the same losing face in a meeting when you tell someone, no, I've decided we're going with option A rather than B. And then the B team feels, ooh, I've lost face in front of everyone. So the fear of conflict is something you really, really have to start thinking about. And it's a dysfunctionality as a leader. You don't want to, there will be conflict. What you need to do basically is to find strategies of how decisions are made, right? The other 3 are lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and inattention to results. Now, different schools are going to have different strategies for dealing with them. But here you have Lencioni's model of dysfunctions. Now, in talking about this pyramid, right, in talking about these 5 dysfunctions, most schools, in fact, I think all schools that I've ever discussed this model with say that there's one big piece that is missing. And they say it's the lack of communication. That's what they say. So when you're looking at this model after this presentation, you want to also add a lack of communication. And it is a dysfunction. People don't know how to communicate, or you haven't opened enough open channels for communication where people feel safe in communicating their ideas with each other within this digital transformation. All right. So that's the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Let's go to my next slide. Before I go to my next slide, let's go backwards a bit. And that's the Lencioni test. This is what I love. So for your own discovery, and you can use this not only for digital transformation, but for any situation where you have a team working. If you just Google it, you will find questions. And each of these questions look at one particular aspect of your team. Now, it's very interesting because some schools I've worked with say, oh, this is just like, popular psychology, something you get off a magazine. And I agree to some extent with that because the questions appear very easy. They're very simple questions to answer. And there's a 15 question type that you can get almost free on the internet. It moves up to a 45 questionnaire, 45 questions in the questionnaire that you pay for. But what I find interesting is that once people have done, or once my teachers have done this test, they turn around and they say to me, actually, it's quite accurate. This Lencioni test is very accurate. It's really told me things about my team that I did not know, or it's made me realize something that I didn't actually pay attention to in building this team to achieve my digital transformation. So, key takeaway, go Google it, do it in your school. It's very interesting. You can take it anywhere you like, either as popular psychology, or you want to take it more seriously and do a paid version of it. It's a very interesting test that's going to tell you a lot about the team that is handling your digital transformation, and then highlight things which you need to look at, aspects of your team to improve their overall performance. So do that Lencioni test. It's easy to get. So let's get back to the last part of my presentation before I open to Q&A. And this is about assessing your transformation. So just 2 minutes on this slide before we start taking questions, I assume. So here you have. Don't forget that when you are assessing how well you are getting on with the process, it needs to be both qualitative and quantitative. Lots of schools, in my experience, say, it's so hard. It is hard, but it is important, so you have to do it. You've got to do a qualitative look as well as a quantitative look. So don't just look at the number of computers you've bought, or how fast your internet is working, or how many days out you are, or how many lessons were not delivered online. That's just qualitative. So that's just quantitative. You want to look at the qualitative. How has it actually affected your learning? And that's a real challenge to do. We've done it with, I think, 2 different schools, and it's very challenging, but it is doable. The other aspect of assessment is, of course, don't just use summative. Don't do this at the end of your year or at the end of your 3-year digital transformation cycle. Use formative assessments as well. This does not mean that you should have a meeting every week. To try to avoid weekly 2-hour meetings on digital transformation, because there's wear and tear on the poor teachers, right? Most of them don't understand it. What you want to do is to have one point person, either a point teacher or a point administrator, who looks specifically at assessment, and they go around assessing it from different aspects, because it is very tiring to have to go for a digital transformation meeting every single week. Always humanize the process. I would say it's great to humanize the process. Lots of people just simply sit down with your teachers, leaders, and ask, how has it affected you? What are your problems? What are you facing? Challenges that you are facing? Has it improved the students' performance? Has it augmented your learning? Has it modified the way that you teach? Do you think the learning is better with this digital transformation, or this little piece of technology that I'm giving to you? How has it improved it? So these are the questions that you really should be looking in terms of assessment. And I think that is the end of my very, very short presentation. And I will now hand it to the moderator for a Q&A, I suppose. I will stop sharing screen. Right. Stop share. And back to everyone. Let me see the chat box. My goodness, the chat box. Right. I have lots and lots of questions. So let's deal with one question. And the question is, what are your suggestions for the school where learners are not privileged to have an access to devices when we incorporate blended learning? Right. Well, this is a great question because it talks about the digital divide. The haves and the don't haves. And I see it every day in Indonesia. I see it in Indonesia because I've worked with many different schools through the government, and because of that, I've spoken to schools at different price points. For those schools which are struggling, then let's start with your shared vision. You start by having more modest aims. You remember at the beginning of my talk, I was talking to you about, okay, let's go a Google search. Oh, I love the look of this class. It's so beautiful. It's a classroom with big screen and everything. And you don't even have the students to have devices. So that's a problem. What you do, you have more modest aims. So, for example, in a school in a village that I work with, this is really in the villages, not even outside the capital city of Indonesia, but in a small village. And we said, well, why don't we get a sponsor to find, let's say, 10 smartphones? Let's have 10 smartphones. Would it help if we gave you one big screen TV with internet Wi-Fi access that we can then beam YouTube videos to you, or we'll download all the YouTube videos to you into one flash disk, and you could just use the flash disk over and over again. So you don't even need Wi-Fi, just a big screen TV. And that's worked. I mean, they did it like for a month, and from the initial reports from the school, it is working. It is working. And the students are starting to feel that they're part of this digital transformation. They are part of the new way of learning. So that's two things. One, you could downsize your vision. Number two, you could find sponsors or look for shared devices. And number three, you don't always need Wi-Fi synchronous learning. You could, for example, just get one big projector and screen and one laptop. You could have one teacher download a lot of material into a flash disk and then simply use the videos to augment your teaching. So that is my answer for number one. Number two, another question. Share some challenges for leaders for digital transformation. Okay, there are lots of challenges. They start from having the shared vision. Different people are going to have different visions, and you've got to decide as a school how you actually resolve these decision making. Now, it's going to take too long, but basically what you want to do is you must distinguish between conflict resolution and decision making. They are two different things. Okay? Decision making process is one aspect, but how you deal with the conflict is a different aspect of it. So look at that. Look at these two different things, because they are two different things. Lots of people just lump it together and say, oh, we have conflict. I don't like conflict. Well, nobody likes conflict, but conflict is healthy. There's healthy conflict and there's unhealthy conflict. And what you want to do is to, as the leader, take charge or grab the bull by the horns of these healthy conflicts, because they make your school more robust. They make your digital transformation better. You make better decisions with healthy conflicts. Okay, I've got a question, and I think I've answered it. This educator from Bhutan, I feel you, Bhutan. I live in Indonesia. We're not famous for stable internet connection. We are not famous for stable internet connection. We have very limited resources, which is why I say, go back to the drawing board. Sit down and say, this is what I have in terms of resources. This is the amount of money I have, as little as it is. This is the time frame. These are the internet capabilities that I have. And then once you understand your school and your situation and the digital environment that you have, it is then that you can then make a proper assessment. What can I achieve in terms of digital transformation. What you don't want to do, Bhutan, what I tell all my schools in Indonesia and Myanmar to do is don't go to Google and Google search all these developed country Google classrooms and these beautiful tech that's there, because it's too challenging to ever achieve that level. It will come eventually, I'm sure, and I pray it will come eventually, but it's not going to happen in the next year. So you do the challenges that you can to bring your classroom closer to that model. And then as technology gets cheaper, as we can afford, as the cost of technology gets cheaper, that is when you can then seize that opportunity. So a shout out to the educated Bhutan. I know exactly what you are talking. Okay, so we're going to stop now. We're running short of time. It was such a pleasure to be here with all of you today. Have a great digital transformation. Take care, everyone.
Amazing session. Thank you so much for being a part of it today. It was a privilege to have you with us.